along the 500-kilometer coastline of Ghana between Keta and Benin is a cluster of ancient forts and castles built between 1482 and 1786. These forts and castles were the last memories slaves had of their homeland before being shipped off across the Atlantic, never to return. Initially, these strongholds served as fortified trading posts, offering protection from other foreign settlers, threats from the African population. Trading in beads, tobacco, rum, ivory, gold, and other wares boomed until the castles gradually imprisoned slaves who were reduced to yet another commodity. The Cape Coast and Elmina slave dungeons are one of the oldest and most distressing sights of the slave trade in Ghana.
I hope I didn't startle you. You may be wondering the reason for my being here. That's simple. I'm still lingering around. Yes, I'm here to share my experience with you and ensure that no one else goes through this ugly experience ever again.
Even though most of us have some sense of the carnage that defined the transatlantic slave trade, nothing can prepare you for the experience retracing the footsteps of African slaves through the dark dungeons.
Once a slave set foot in a castle, he could spend up to 3 months in captivity under dreadful conditions before being shipped off to the New World. I remember the stench that greeted me when I first entered this room. Every hope I had ever nursed vanished as everyone could be seen gasping for air. There were no windows, only a couple of holes that allowed in some little air, just enough for us to stay alive. In this dark, gloomy room, I felt so sick that I wished and prayed to be relieved of life. Consequently, I lost my appetite for everything.
The heat in the poorly ventilated room was insufferable. Coupled with that, the floor was covered with the blood and mucus which had come out of the slaves because of the unrest.
As slaves, our spirits had already been broken, and our self-esteem already wallowed in hopelessness. We were auctioned at the marketplace in the courtyard, where the men were separated from the women. You considered yourself lucky to be alive because those who were of no use to the slave traders were thrown into the sea. But then, you still wished for death to end it all, even though we craved for some dignity.
Up to 1,000 male and 500 females were shackled and crammed in the castle's humid, poorly ventilated dungeons with hardly any space to lie down and without water or sanitation, whilst the floor of the dungeon was littered with human waste.
Disoriented and demoralized, we had no choice but to stomach the stench, and many of us fell seriously ill.
Raping was the order of the day. Almost every day, the governor stood on his balcony to select one of the female slaves gathered below to be his mistress for the day.
This one. Sir, this one? Right. Move it. Move it. Move it. Let's go. Move it.
After being at the mercy of his sexual fantasies, the terrified women were giving a proper meal and a bath, possibly the first wash they would have had since being kept in the dungeon.
Sometimes the torture was too much to bear, and this usually resulted in some kind of resistance.
Any revolt was harshly disciplined. Men were sent to the condemned cell, a small pitch-black space for slaves who were seen as rebellious. There they were starved to death, whilst others were beaten and chained to cannonballs in the courtyard.
The last shreds of hope would wither away with every day of our captivity in the castle.
The slave traders would torture Africans each and every day in a process referred to as making a slave.
Church services were held in the castles. On Sunday mornings, after torturing the slaves, the Europeans would go to church and thank their Lord for giving them the strength. Our screams of sorrow would mix with the sacred chants of the Europeans. And when the sound of our pain got too loud, the Europeans would shout and praise God even louder. And after church service, they would get right back to torturing us.
All of you, just behave, and this will go a lot easier than it has to.
On the seaboard side of the slave castles was a door through which the slaves were lowered into boats and then loaded like cargo onto big slaving ships further out at sea, never to set foot in their homeland again.
And with a final goodbye to the freedom we once knew, those of us who survived outbreaks of malaria, cholera, and yellow fever took our final steps on this continent through the door of no return, the last stop before embarking on the treacherous journey across the Atlantic Ocean.
The days of the slave trade may long be gone, but the interior of the castles are still a haunting reminder of the past. A horrible past, an irreversible and immeasurable damage.